For joining us. My name is Alexander Goslin. I will be the moderator today. I'm currently the president of the OEMBA Alumni Association, as well as in my professional life, a commercial lender with Pacific West Bank here in Portland, Oregon. It's my pleasure to be the moderator today. This is our first and inaugural set of virtual series that we hope to make a going event. And so I look forward to hearing your feedback afterwards. There will be a small survey passed around to each of you attendees to help us formulate some suggestions and ideas for how we can continue to create value with these types of opportunities and engage with you, the greater business community here in Portland, Oregon. We will have a very informative and outstanding presentation from my colleague Sandy Bide. He will go through what it's like to start up a company within your own existing company, the entrepreneurship, if you will. His level of experience in the category is unmatched. So we will be very impressed and gain a lot of value from this presentation. Just to let you know, your mics and your video will be muted for this program. If you'd like to engage, please mention any questions or concerns in the chat. I will moderate those questions towards the end. If there's something that I find in this chat to be informative and something that we can add to the presentation, I may engage Sandy through the presentation as well. So with that, I am looking forward to engaging Mr. Bide with the presentation. So over to you.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate your kind introduction. I'm pleased to be here. First of all, I want to thank the entire University of Oregon and Executive MBA staff. To pull this kind of a webinar is not an easy task, and I want to thank everybody who has helped to put this together. So thank you so very much. Welcome everybody. I'm pleased to be here. As Alex mentioned, I'll be here talking maybe 40, maybe 50 minutes, and at the time we'll be open to questions. So primarily topic I wanted to choose here, we are at Oregon Executive MBA, and a lot of us have startups on our mind, and many of us go outside our own companies to do startups outside. But there is a growing trend to do startups within your own company. So that's the topic I'm interested in talking about. So the best startups generally come from somebody needing to scratch an itch. What I mean by that is something that bothers you, something, an unanswered problem, something that bugs you, that it should be done in a particular way, and that's what I call an itch. And that's what that's normally a starting point for doing any startups. Now, sorry for that. Normally what happens is in science and technology, or even in services business, there are normally fundamental advances that happen in science and technology, and that's where innovation happens. But there are also many other areas where advances that come seemingly from unrelated areas create a possibility to create amazing solutions. I'll give you a quick example. When Apple came out with its iPhone, none of the technology that went into iPhone was not there before. It was there all along. It was the unique combination and stuff putting together that created a wow, and that created an unaddressed problem. So it's very important to not always look at new innovations, but there are innovative ways of integrating existing technologies to create a wow. So when you have this itch, when you have this idea in your brain, there are normally two ways to go about it. The first one is to really propose it internally, but those who have proposed startups within their own companies, they will face, in most cases, a lot of headwind. And that happens because there is lack of vision. Normally, big companies have a large amount of bureaucracy. They have too much process for everything. It's not very clear who makes the decision. And everything happens slowly, weekly meetings, monthly meetings. And eventually, some of those bright ideas are dead on arrival, and they don't go anywhere. It just frustrates the people who are within the company that their ideas go nowhere. So there is an alternate path, which normally people take the idea outside, but it's not all rosy scene there either. You have to assemble your team, you have to find funding, you have to find a way to create your minimum viable product, you have to find ways to validate your idea with the market, and then you cannot just put a kludge together. You have to take the kludge that you have and put it into a real product. And then there are other questions like scaling and distribution. And if you were to look at, and I'll talk about it in my next slide, the success rate there is extremely low, because if you look at startup success rate in an angel investor portfolio, it's about 5 to 10%. So think about 1 out of 10 are likely to succeed. Even with professional angel investors who have 5+ years of experience, it's about 20 to 30%. Now, if you take the venture capitalist route, it's about 0.7%, and the chances of you being successful about 8%. If you calculate all of that, you have about a 1 in 2,000 success rate of being funded. So to summarize, this is not a simple, easy task just to say, oh, my company, I'm not successful within my own company, I'm going to go out. Now, from a company perspective, today what companies do is they look outside to get some intellectual property. They look at innovation, they look at technology outside. But from a company perspective, from a large company perspective, going out and buying out those startups is becoming extremely expensive. I'm trying to compare that of cost of doing a startup within your own company versus doing acquisition of an external company, external startup. Those are very, very expensive. Furthermore, it's very hard to integrate a startup in a huge company because for many reasons, the financial systems could be different, the culture could be different, the mindset, the vision, mission, values could all be different. And primarily, many times, it's not for technology, it's not for anything else, but large companies tend to be inflexible, and there is a culture clash. As a result of that, key people who bring in all that intellectual property often leave once they cash out. And then there is a loss of identity. Your name as a startup might be known to people. You become acquired by a big company, and your name is lost. So internal management is really a promising possibility to sustain corporate innovation with their existing assets. So I did some research, and I found average successful startup raised about 41 million through VCs and exited for about 240 and odd chunk since about 2007. Now, out of those companies who were acquired, the Crunchbase report says they raised an average of 29.4 and sold for $155+ million. So it is about 5 to little over 5 times more expensive to go out and acquire a company than have homegrown, organically grown startup within your own company. Just a quick example, I'm not going to go through, you can read as much as I can, but here are some 10 startup acquisitions in 2018. You can look at some of the big companies on the left-hand side, the startups that they acquired, and the amount they paid, in case of hundreds of millions of dollars, and in some case, several billion dollars. Now, that's not a easy path, and there are always going to be companies who have something that you have never thought of. So don't get me wrong, you're still going to need to acquire external companies to incorporate in your portfolio. But if you have the idea from your own employees, it's probably a better idea to do a startup within and find ways to prevent those employees going out, rather do them internally. Now, how have these companies, big companies, traditionally dealt with it? they normally do is, if there might be a new innovation being created into R&D, they might go into decentralized autonomous teams, they spawn off teams, or they might have internal entrepreneurial ventures within. They might, in some cases, now big companies like GE and HP and Intel also have a corporate venture capital arm, which means they will fund some of these companies with ideas and innovation from outside. With strategic investment, they might companies might work with other companies to find a joint way of developing products. So there are probably more than 8 of these things that I have talked about. There are probably many other ways that companies today deal with in order to create innovation and technology. But even if you decide to do an internal startup, the problems still exist. The one that I talked about lack of vision, there is too much bureaucracy of Intel. I'll give you some of my experience base. It almost takes somewhere between 9 months to 12 months to just go on pitching your idea internally with no light at the end of the tunnel that you are going to be successful and somebody is going to listen to you. Most of the people who are within a company are sharply focused on quarterly revenues, and when you have big ideas, that you are less likely to get any attention. Plus, many companies, you really don't know who within the company has the dollar amount and can actually fund it, and where the buck can stop. So as a result, within the management company, the puck gets transferred from one to the other with no end of any decisions. So you can see the infographics on the right hand side. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. So if your company culture is exactly the same, you can keep on pounding the concrete, so to say, but you will not get anywhere unless there are some fundamental changes that need to happen within the large company. So here is a case of, I want to present a case for doing a startup within your own company, in spite of the problems that we talked about. There are clearly many advantages of doing an internal startup. The little picture on the side that shows there are many of these planets that are already aligned when you start doing a startup within your own company. First of all the building blocks that the startup requires are already there. There are skilled employees, there are mentors, there are experts inside who may have deep knowledge in many of those areas. Big companies also have capital. They are the largest source of capital, where if you really look at what startups need in terms of funding, it's probably a fifth or sixth order of in your books. It is most of the times it's a tiny amount that startup needs to get going compared to the overall revenue of a large company. You also have access to all the existing patents within the company, all the know-how, all the trade secrets, what have you. One of the most important things is finding a comfy office space. So doing it inside means you have access to office spaces, conference rooms. Your health and dental and vision is taken care of. You have people network, and you don't have to start from scratch. And in many cases, if your startup was to fail for whatever reason, you still have a fallback, which is to go back to your old product group or a division. So there is some level of comfort. And the last and the most important thing is you have an existing database of customers. There is sales and marketing in place, channel and distribution in place. So the bottom line is large companies are fully tooled to build their own corporate startups. And what it does is it helps keep the entrepreneurial employees connected with the parent company. They don't go out. All the IP stays within the company. So an internal startup, in my definition, is creation of an independent company within an existing business or division of a parent company. It's not a team that you create under a product group. It's not a team that you create under a division. It's an independent entity that has the full capability to decide on their future. That's what I mean by independent company. So why independent company? The reason is people who do startups have the passion, have the fire under their belly. They have a desire to succeed. And those are the people who you want to lead this startup because they have intimate knowledge of customers. They have intimate knowledge of users, their problem statements. They are in the thick of it. And those are the people you want them to lead this independent company. You also want people who are knowledgeable to execute, because having vision, mission, everything is fine, but to be able to execute on a day-to-day level is important. Plus, because the startup is small, the number of people are small, you're really creating a nimble, agile, high-velocity culture. And what that does is, you might take certain decisions within your business, but all of us know that market and customers and their needs change. So you need to be nimble to be able to change your decisions on an ongoing basis. And the costs are really low because there is no divisional hierarchy, 7, 8 layers. You're lean, nimble, you have a flat organization. Hopefully the CEO of a startup within a big company knows everybody on a personal level. And then normally when I say independent, it also means that you have the full autonomy to make all the architectural level decisions, financial decisions, execution decisions. There is really no one above you. It's like a company with the board of directors. Yes, once in a month, you talk to your funders, but on a day-to-day basis, on an operational level, you're not going out and waiting for somebody for the decisions. As it happens, startups are motivated to succeed. The process is in people. If you want to get something done, you don't have to find paths. So the processes are light. In some cases, the process might be a simple communication, screaming over your wall to your colleague and say, hey, I want this and that. So because of that, one thing that you can imagine, the decisions are taken faster. Everything happens in a very fast manner. The key source or the soul of a company is its people. You want the best and the brightest people to be part of your startup. Now, if you're doing an external startup, you have to find those people outside who are willing to be part of your company. Here, you have the resource pool available in a large company to hire the best and brightest people and cajole them, if you want to call, into your startup. And one thing that I hate when I was managing is this constant harassment saying, give me proof, bring me data, bring me evidence, bring me proof. And not everything can be put together into an Excel spreadsheet, because when you are talking with customers day in and day out, a lot of that data is here. You cannot necessarily communicate, but you know exactly what their problem statements are, and what you are building is in solving those problems. So the idea for having an independent company is to remove completely all the internal politics, stakeholder fights, who owns what, and that's the reason I'm harping on creating an independent company inside a big company. To summarize, independent really means to freedom. You have to have freedom to deliver what customers want. Also implement a nimble, agile, and high velocity culture. That is what I call go culture. And then creating a trusting environment. You're not doubting other people, whether they are looking from their selfish viewpoint, but they know that the success of the startup is the paramount thing on top of their mind. Many times it happens in big companies just because you have managers, directors, vice presidents who are taking decisions without really knowing really the customer, the technology, what the innovation is, what the strategies are. And so you want to take day in and day out, you want to take knowledge-based decisions. People who have in-depth knowledge of the domain should be taking all the decisions. And independence also allows you to take rapid innovation. I'll give you a quick example. I wanted to build a piece of hardware. When I started looking inside my own large company, it would have taken me 5 to 6 months before I could get any samples for a board or a system. I said, nothing doing. I'm doing a startup. I found out an outside company in Bay Area who could deliver me the product in less than 2 weeks. So you are looking for a quick turnaround, go, not really waiting through a big company culture to get things done. And why do all of this? At the end of the day, I want to deliver results ahead of the competition. I want to solve customer problems. I want to see a smile on their face. And I want to be there the first. I want to be the leader. I want to be ahead of everybody else. This might be a funny picture here, but independent internal startups are like a kind of adult kids staying in their parents' house. In a way, they are staying in their basement. So they have independence. They can come in and go out anyone. But every once in a while, if you want to launder your clothes, there is washer and dryer upstairs. If you are really hungry to have some food, your mother can cook every once in a while. But for most of the time, you are quite independent. So there is a fallback. For example, if you lose a job or your startup doesn't do well, you still have a backup you can rest on. So hopefully this analogy drives my point that you're still independent, but you still have a fallback to be able to go to if you really need to. I think most of business folks in marketing are used to 2x2 matrices. So I'm going to take help out of those 2x2 matrices to communicate some of my points. So on this 2x2, on the left-hand bottom side, you will see something that leverages existing technical competencies from within the company. The second one is something that you are creating or need, which is outside your domain. It requires new technical competencies. On a vertical axis, you have leveraging existing business models and something that requires new business models. So a simple thing in the left-hand bottom quadrant is what I call routine. You might be creating a next generation of a BMW. You might have maybe heads-up display. You might have little things here added here and there. You might be creating a new index fund for Vanguard. You might be creating yet another animated film for Pixar. And you might be using mechanical mouse, and now maybe you want to create an optical mouse. It's the case where there is an existing business model. People already know what the technical competencies are. I don't think that's quite the area that I would focus on, but let's focus on the remaining 3 quadrants. Let's go up, where it requires a new business model. It's a disruptive way a way of disrupting the market. So you can look at open source software for software companies. That was something totally new. It was a new business model. You can look at how video is delivered today. We started with VHS tapes, then we went to DVDs, and now we don't even go to the stores. Completely the business model has been turned upside down. And look at ride sharing. You can look at Ubers and Lyfts. That's a completely different business model. It's not that there is nothing new in terms of technology. Let's focus on the right-hand side bottom corner, where it's completely radical. That means I'm creating something totally different, a new biotechnology for pharmaceuticals, or a new jet engine for an aircraft, or new fiber optic cable for telecom companies. So these are examples where you need to have new technical competencies, but the delivery model, the distribution model, the existing business model is still the same. Now, the most interesting part is the top right-hand quadrant, which is you're fundamentally changing the business model, and you also have new technical competencies. So, for example, personalized medicine for pharmaceutical companies, or digital imaging for Polaroid or Kodak are now internet search for newspapers. So it's a completely new business model. You're not depending on paper delivery. Now you are going to internet to get your job done. So with this idea and innovation landscape, let me move on and map onto the same 4 quadrants. As I mentioned, I don't know if you see those colors, but the top left and the bottom right are also likely internal startup areas. But you get the real bang for the buck when you have new technical competencies and you have new business models. That means it's quite a departure from a technology perspective, as well as quite a departure from business model perspective. And my suggestion to people who want to do startups within your own company, it's perfectly okay to look at the disruptive as well as radical as possible areas for startups, but you are going to get a biggest bang for the buck if you are on the right-hand side top corner. Now looking at the left-hand bottom corner, if it's an incremental improvement, normally there is no need to have a startup. You can manage this innovation by a product group internally. For example, in the past we talked about R&D gets split into autonomous team to get the work done. That's not where for that you don't really require a startup, let alone a startup that's internal. So to capture or to summarize, the disruptive and radical quadrants are good enough for an internal startup within a company. The biggest bang for the buck comes from the right-hand top corner, which I have named as architecture. So let me give you a few pearls of wisdom from the experience that I had in my past. So this is a case study, what I call the itch. I had a similar itch in about 2013, 2014 timeframe. What I did was I had that itch from about April 2013 to about May 2014. I took it to all the directors, senior directors, CTOs, VPs, senior VPs, executive VPs, whoever I could find, with a very simple 7-slide deck. At first, I described what led me to that itch. Then I talked about my grandiose vision about changing the planet, changing the world, whatever that vision is. Then I focused on the problem statements that I saw outside and typical use cases. Then I talked about how big is this opportunity. And then I mentioned about, hey, here are the technologies that I would use. Here is the strategy. Here is how I'm going to productize. The 6th and 7th slide basically talked about, hey, this is how many dollars I need for investment from senior executives. And then very important thing at the end is outline them an execution plan that says, hey, over the next 8 quarters, this is what I'm going to achieve quarter by quarter. And this is my scorecard that you can hold me to. Provided I get all of the 6 things done in a manner that I want, then it's up to me as a leader to deliver on those milestones. So think about, for senior executives, they're not going to look at more than 6 or 7 slides. So if you were to decide to do your own proposals within your company, have 7 slides, you might have 70 slides in the backup, but 7 slide is what you want to show to your senior executives.
Sandy, we've gotten some questions here, and I've actually been doing some thinking while you've been in this presentation, but when you're the entrepreneur inside this company coming up with this idea, have you ever protected yourself via an NDA, or have you kept the pool of people you're talking to a minimum so that if this idea really is disruptive or really is the cornerstone to the new competition, have you ever tried to protect that idea in case the internal startup was to be a very viable option for that company and they just wanted to keep it internally? How do you protect your idea?
So you're talking about talking to people internally or externally?
Internally.
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 So the answer is fairly simple. When you are I don't know if most of you know, but when you took the job, everything you did within that related to that company is owned by the company. So within the company that I was in, I knew my IP was owned by my company. I didn't talk with anybody and everybody. I talked with people who mattered and who had either the decision power or the knowledge of who to go to be successful. So now the question is, was I talking outside? Yes, I was talking to folks outside there. I did do NDA with companies to protect my parent company being exposed. But internally, it's a fair game. Later on, maybe I'll address that. When I did do the startup, we had the concept of closed room projects. That means once the idea has been approved, you put it in a so-called closed room manner. That means not anybody and everybody has to know anything and everything, because what you want to do is rapid progress. And more people get involved, and the harder it becomes. So you only want people with knowledge and part of your internal startup to be knowledgeable of what you are doing. Did I answer that question?
Yes. Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, questions are welcome, and of course, I will answer more questions at a later time.
Yep.
So this is just an example. This is from my previous company. This is out in the public domain. You can see the source at the bottom. So I'm not sharing anything that's confidential. So when I went to my senior, by the way, let me retract back just a tiny bit. So I took it around for almost a year. It was falling on the deaf ear within the company. So I approached the CEO of the company saying, hey, I have an idea. Nobody is listening. Are you interested? This is several $100 million worth of an idea. And I got 20 minutes on his calendar. So I knew my time was important, and I was not going to waste all my time in things that didn't matter. So this is what I told him. I basically said, hey, and I'm going to read this just so that you can get the idea of communicating, how you communicate. I basically said, hey, being in this high-tech industry, nature of computing is changing. That means we are at an inflection point in the history of data and computing. In the last 66 years since ENIAC, and people who don't know ENIAC, that was the first computer from 1940s that MIT and I think it was Army that built it to know ahead of time where the airplanes were and how to tackle them. So data has always come to computing, and I basically predicted, saying not so going into the future. In the future, the computing has to go where data is, and the future is about scaling and distributed intelligence. And we neither have the wireless capacity to keep sending data where the computing is, because in the next few years we are going to have 50 billion devices and 1 trillion sensors. And it doesn't make economic sense to send that data up through the wireless channel. I said, hey, that's one data point. The second data point is, and remember, I made that remark on my third slide where knowledge and technologies from disparate domains, you can start putting together to create an innovation. So being in the semiconductor and high-tech industry, I was not much connected with LEDs. But what I saw in LEDs was, there was a revolution happening. I was seeing the demise of incandescent and halogen and other lights. And I said, hey, everywhere from Bangladesh to any place in Africa to all the developing countries, LEDs were going to take over. And so my clear proposal to my senior management was, hey, these bulbs are going to be in every street light, in every home, in every commercial building, every park, every tunnel, every parking lot, every manufacturer. They're going to be everywhere. I said, hey, I see a need to put some intelligence in those lights. So the next slide I said is, we have a tremendous opportunity to create simultaneous revolution by ensuring every LED bulb on the planet is also a sensor, compute, and communication node as a part of the planet-wide sensor network. And that in turn will benefit cities, homes, communities, businesses, citizens around the world. Electric bulb, it happens to be the most abundant end node of an electrical supply chain with its proximity to humans, and can offer tremendous new value which would offset the deployment cost and provide further electricity savings. So this was my second slide. I painted a great big vision. And I won't go through the details, by the way, for lack of time, but a third slide was a visual slide that shows problem statements, which was, hey, I want to solve problem statements that related to emergencies. If you look at 40% of our energy budget of any municipality is spent in lighting up the streets. And I said, that's ludicrous. We are wasting by lighting up the streets where nobody's there on the streets. I looked at waste management, I looked at traffic congestions, I looked at environmental impact. Within the home and offices, I looked at securities. I looked at what I call periphery monitoring. I looked at places like airports, and I want to look at terrorists walking in. So I looked at a plethora of problems that could be solved just by having intelligence in lights that are going to be everywhere. And it really immediately became very clear what the opportunity was. And I think one thing that I would suggest is be visual and not as much alphanumeric, but more picture to communicate your ideas. And then I basically said, hey, all of these, each one of these is a potential Internet of Things end node. And that was the simple thing. And I'm not going to go through because some of this information might be proprietary, but in terms of what technologies I was going to use, in terms of dollars I asked, and the score sheet that I presented. So I won't present that because that's internal, but the slides that I have presented are from public domain that I presented in 2012 at a solid state lighting conference for Department of Energy. So going forward, 7 slides, 20-minute one-on-one. If you can make it painfully obvious to people what the value is, what your customer statement is, and how you can solve the problems and make millions of dollars. You have to almost stay at a 6th grade English level. Simple message, simple way of communicating what the value is and what problems you are going to solve and how existing assets can help you solve those.
You made it seem pretty simple with 7 slides, 20 minutes with a one-on-one with the CEO, led to several $1 million, but a lot of us are trying to clear the hurdle of the capital requirements to fund these types of businesses. But how long did it take you from beginning to end to come up with this idea, to start working on your cohort of people who are finding this idea to be acceptable and wanting to be part of that group? How long did it start from there till the time you had the dollars allocated to you to do the startup?
It took about 1 year of convincing with about 200 slide deck with 7 slides in the front. Once the idea was sold to the CEO, for whatever reasons, it took about a month to get it into my cost center. And it took about 3 or 4 months to assemble the team. Because I had been talking to people all along, so it was pretty easy at that stage. So there was an independent company in terms of my ability to make decisions in terms of customers, architectures, people, and execution. One thing, I love finance folks, but I don't like them being counting every day, every quarter saying, what is your spending? Why are you spending here? Why are you spending there? I basically said, have a solid business plan and then have the latitude to see and spend money as needed. I told my CEO that I was going to be frugal, but I'll spend money where it is absolutely needed, as I see fit. And I gave them monthly visual updates. I created demos. I took pictures and videos, and I told them, hey, here are all updates. If you happen to be in Oregon, come to my lab and I'll show you it face-to-face. Otherwise, here are some videos. And then ability to choose execution methods in terms of what method of software development. So for example, I'm pretty solid in terms of agile development. How do you go about executing your plan? I decided that of my own. So quick history, in May 24, I got several $1 million funding by the CEO. I ended up creating an internal 40+ organization to do an IoT platform startup. Prior to that, the business model, the customer list, the competition, channel, my market analysis, execution plan, manufacturing plan, what have you, was already in the cooking up to that stage. Set up the team by August of 2014. The most interesting thing that I'm most proud of is that the first platform was produced by December 31st, 2014, and by 9 p.m. I remember sending an email to my CEO saying, "Hey, the world's first fully functional smart light is now working." And all that happened in 4.5 months. Looking back, if I would have done that using regular processes of a large company, it would have taken 12 to 18 months. I also did the software stack that was completed in 6 months. If I would have done it through regular processes of business meetings, stakeholder meetings, getting approvals, and all of that, it would have easily taken 24 to 36 months. So there is a learning here. It is this deep mentality, deep passion to succeed day in and day out, go really, really, really fast. Find out whichever is the shortest and the best and the high quality and method of doing and getting the job done. You go and do that.
Mm-hmm. Sandy, real quick, what was the burden of this idea on the parent company? When you took the 40 people to start the IoT team, did you take those from existing teams to form your function, or did you look outwardly and bring people into the business to be specifically on this team? What was the burden to the parent company?
So both. I took about 8 or 10 people, maybe 8 people full-time working on the project that were coming from internally, that were hand-chosen best and the brightest. A couple of them were part-time. For example, if I want to get a mechanical design, I don't need a full-time person. I need just to get that job done on a short term. And then I had over 30 people that were in my previous company. They're called green badges, which are temporary workers, contractors from India. And that's another thing that was very helpful, because during the day we worked, in the evening we handed over to the team in India. Early in the morning at 8 o'clock, we took whatever they had done. So it was a 24-hour round-the-clock development. So I had about 40 people, as I mentioned, full-time, part-time, and contractors. And then within this 4.5 months, I created a completely pre-configured, validated, certified platform with OS and sensors and drivers and audiovisual and sensor edge processing. This might be too technical for people who are not technical, so I won't go through the entire detail. But what this created is an entire platform. And within that time frame, that's one beauty with agile methods, is every 2 or 3 weeks, you have a demoable product with the functions that you have been working on. So I was creating a real-time development. Whenever at the end of the agile period, I would take them to top 8 or 10 key customers and show them, is that what, and then the dialogue would be, is that what you want? Is that what you want? Is that what you want? Until they got bored and said, that's exactly what I want. And then I moved on to the next thing that they wanted me to work on. And within that time frame, I established the business relationship with OEMs, ecosystem partners, service providers, security folks. There was a whole bunch of folks. So it wasn't a simple, easy task of a development. It was a full-fledged business. I had a business development guy who was also connecting with customers and understanding what their needs were. So, pearls of wisdom: no management hierarchy. You are the boss. Yeah, this is how you negotiate your money with the CEO. The buck stops at you in terms of taking decisions. The other important thing was everyone on my team, junior or senior, had equal voice. I was their boss, but I was not their boss. If anybody could say, Sandy, you're wrong. This is what the right way is. Every member precisely knew what the vision strategy was, who the customers were, what the problem statements were, where the timelines were, what the level of rigor that was required to execute. So I didn't need to be there. If I was showing it to customers and a senior VP walked into the lab, anybody within my team could demo and talk with the same passion and the same base level knowledge as anybody else. I chose agile method simply because every 2 or 3 weeks I would have a demoable partial products. I also instituted something called no more than 15 minutes of being in the block state. So if an engineer was sitting there and saying, I don't know what to do, I told them they cannot they cannot waste more than 15 minutes. So we got into a conference room in front of a whiteboard. We described what the problem was. We envisioned what the solutions were. We picked up a solution and we went ahead with it. If the solution was wrong, we corrected it. But we never waited more than 15 minutes to keep going. I completely eliminated weekly and monthly status reports because that's in my vocabulary. It's in lieu of management. If you know people what they are doing on a daily basis, you don't need weekly or monthly status reports. As a result, engineers were working full time on engineering, and it's for engineers, this is nirvana. When they get to work on engineering, they're the most happiest engineers. Within my team, anybody could present to the senior leadership team. Another thing that engineers like is having pizza and beer. You know, at the end of 3 weeks, you produce something interesting, you go out and enjoy. And complete openness in team and no limits on how to get the job done. So, if you are going to create an independent company within your big company, you have to foster a culture of openness, honesty, and trust. There are no hidden agendas. Give people the responsibility to work at their peak. Most people who worked in my startups, of their own, came at 7 o'clock and left at 8 o'clock at night when I had to really tell them to go home because they were spending too much time. You need to institute a new leadership style where you are not the controller. You are basically helping people achieve an objective. It is people's ideas and people's interest and focus is what you need to enable. You know, as a leader, I was not knowledgeable about everything. So if a mechanical engineer comes to me and says, Sandy, this is not the way to go, you need to design it this way, that's the way to go, because people with knowledge ought to take a decision. Make sure that you're sharing vision with all of your team. There are going to be outside people who will try to control. There are always going to be darts thrown at you, and you have to stand up there and be the team advocate and partner with your team in tackling challenges, celebrate successes, and help grow the team. And learn from mistakes. Now, all of these things might sound like motherhood and apple pie, but I have an example in front of me of the late president of India. I don't know if you know, he was the rocket scientist who developed all the rocket technology and many other technologies. And his idea was, when the team is succeeding, the team needs to stand in front of the senior management, and you are absolutely at the back. When there are problems and you make boo-boos and there are mistakes, you are always in front of the team, protecting the team and taking all the heat from the senior management. I think that's the leadership style that I look up to, where if you are successful, it's because of the team. If you're unsuccessful, it's because of your lack of leadership. You need to take the ownership if things don't go right. So quick wrap up. We still have 10 minutes, but it's really important why internal startups, there is a reason why internal startups are attractive. They're cheaper. If you are creating new IPs, that IP remains inside, you get to test the new culture. That means within your startup, if you are creating new culture that's being successful, that might be an impetus for the larger company to learn from and say, hey, maybe there are pieces of that culture that could be installed in a larger company. It's much easier integration. The culture is exactly the same. If you want to pull back this startup into the parent company, it's a lot easier. There is a higher likelihood that the founders and the people who are working on that will stay inside. So all the IP, their intellect remains within the company, and they get to retain their identity. And eventually you can structure this startup in a fashion so that the founders also benefit financially in terms of stocks and other things. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of you. Thank you, Alex, for being the moderator, and I'll open the floor for more questions. Up on the second slide is my LinkedIn connection. If you have more questions beside this 10-minute that allows me, I'm more than happy. On my LinkedIn is also my email address. So thank you again, and I'll open the floor for questions.
Sadi, thank you very much. That was very informative. As a business finance person, I found it super intriguing on how these things can be generated internally, fight that capital issue, provide value to the parent company, and to much chagrin, I'm a finance guy, and he said he doesn't get along with them, but I can prove that he and I do get along just fine. Yeah, I have a list of questions.
It was, by the way, only the bean counting.
Only the bean. Okay, I'm in the finance. I'm not the accounting, so that's
Yeah.
perfect. Hope there's no accountants on the line here, but we have a few questions that were submitted. Keep submitting them as long as this line is open. We'll shut it down at 1 o'clock. But just to kick it off, we had a very similar response from Melissa Kay and Justin Collins. They're both senior managers, Melissa being with a medical device company, and she said she's constantly interested in driving innovation, creating new lines of business, new initiatives within that company. And we talked a little bit about this, how, if an idea does arrive while you're at a company and an employment agreement is there, some people might fight that present or that future value of that idea, right? I could leave. Maybe I do have access to capital and I can start this up and I can hang my own shingle and make this value. How would folks like Melissa Kay and Justin Collins keep that idea inward? You talked a little bit at the end about incentivizing people to stay in the business. They might have to be creative on how they keep this internalized until they get outward, so that IP is theirs. But tell me a little bit about how you incentivize these people, or the parent companies. How did you incentivize that large company besides the impressive value proposition? How does a company now, even my own, the bank, how do I keep these idea creators inside the business?
I think in my, first of all, one other thing that I mentioned, you need to have a person where the buck stops, where ideas, when people have ideas, there needs to be a designated person who says, they come to me. So many times I have found people who have ideas are not, they are not necessarily looking that their idea always be implemented. I think the first and foremost important thing is that their ideas get heard. Once they are heard, then at least that starts a discussion. Now the outcome of the discussion might be, hey, the outcomes could be many. One could be, hey, this quite doesn't fit into the business model. And the parent company has the right to say that. The second could be, hey, this is way out in the left field in terms of products, in terms of technology, in terms of know-how that needs to get this startup started. Mm-hmm. There is a positive way which says, hey, that's a good idea, and the money is given to you. The other idea could be to be able to say the company is, hey, I know the IP is owned by you. Is there any way, if I were to go out and start a company, would you do a minimal strategic investment? So for example, if I need $10-15 million to get an external company started, get the parent company $1 million or $2 as a strategic investment, and they get X amount of shares. And if you were to go to IPO or being acquired, that they have the first right of refusal. So there are many other ways in terms of licensing and others where you can still have some control to be able to pull that company back in a cheaper manner. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the best thing, of course, Alex, is these people who are very innovative, they are your jewels. Mm-hmm. They might be eccentric, mm-hmm. because it's a say, no exciting innovation in this world has come from regular people. All the exciting innovation has come from eccentric people who think differently, think laterally. They have a unique way of looking at problems and solutions. Those are the people you want to retain and listen. And not everything turns into a business, but at least you have to have a an innovative senior executive who listens in an empathetic manner and gives them the right feel to be able to put that idea into a workable model. In many cases, you might say, hey, I'm going to give you a partial money. Why don't you do a rapid prototype and show me how that works? And let's take it to a few key customers and see how your idea flies. And if that flies, then I'll give you more money. So there are methods of going about it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that just the acceptance of these ideas from people, a pathway for people to get their idea on the table, just to even be heard. I can attest that this worked very well. My former bank, Pacific Continental Bank, we created the idea team, the I team, and all it was a suggestion box of people who could accept ideas from the greater staff and say, we're going to entertain anything that comes this way. If it's a value add to the business, if it's a value add to the quality of life of people in this business, we're going to entertain it. So I think sometimes that pathway is the most important part.
Yeah. If I may make one additional comment, I think it might be a worthwhile thing for the parent company to put a template together. That means most people who come up with an idea may not have the business angle, may not know finance, may not know users, may not understand usages, user experience, and technologies. They might only understand a piece. So in some cases, you might have to give them a temporary help of people where they might be lacking. So if, for example, if I'm not a finance guru, somebody within the company might say, hey, I'm going to give you 20 hours of this guy to be able to work with you, to be able to put a business plan. What that does, having a template, is when all these innovative ideas come in, they come in a standard form. It makes it a lot easier to evaluate them if they are in a standard format.
Yep. Terrific. Well, let's get to the next question. Ray engaged here and asked a very interesting question. How do you distinguish yourself as someone capable of being part of or leading the startup internally? How did you make that pitch, besides probably the value that it's going to provide to that company? How did you distinguish yourself as that leader who could take that project on and bring it to the finale?
I don't know if it's more art than science. I think if you wanting to be that leader normally starts with having this immense urge, immense itch. And to me, that's just not enough. You have, whatever itch you are feeling is just a thesis. You have to be able to go out and talk to a half a dozen or a dozen customers who say, hey, if you make that, I'll buy it, right? So now it's not only a business idea, you have an intimate knowledge of users and what their problem statements are. Hopefully you can find somebody with a technology background. And if you have it, that's fantastic. I don't know if I answered the question, but if you have enough passion behind it, you will find a way to find the right guy.
Yeah, I think it's a product of your past performance, right?
Yeah.
If you show yourself as that person who can get a project from beginning to end, that you can be relied upon, I think it's a culmination of a lot of those past experiences. In particular, this wasn't your first rodeo, right? You had a lot of other opportunities to provide value to the company and show that you have that drive.
Yeah.
So I think it's a culmination of a lot of things. But you're right. Passion shining through and being interested in the success of the endeavor and of the parent company is important.
I think most senior management, they know the language of finance. Mm-hmm. You talk to them about dollars and cents, and you have to look at something. Mm-hmm. Either some companies have customer satisfaction index, so they are looking, hey, how can I improve that? How can I reduce the rate of product returns? How can I improve my margins? How can I improve my top line? How can I reduce some kind of a financial measure that you need to communicate your idea that results into the company becoming healthier and stronger? Mm-hmm. If you can talk into their terms, I'll reveal this to you. When I went to my CEO, I had a figure in my mind, and I actually didn't show that dollar slide. And he said, Sandy, what are you looking for? And the figure that I had in my mind was much, much lower. I had a flash in my mind where I said, I'm going to a CEO, am I going to ask this amount? And the CEO will say, why are you coming to me? So if I'm going to CEO, I should better ask a large amount. And I asked the large amount, and he said, make it happen. It was that simple. Now that I look back,
it's always easy to start high, then go low, than to work the other direction. But again, I think that's probably Sandy, make it happen. I've seen you do it before. I see the value in you, in this idea, and of the team you're planning on putting together, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't okay. I'll run the quick calc and see if this is going to make me money. It's for me to be happy, or for you to be happy and continue on with this endeavor. I need you to be comfortable, right? So, no, great example. Know your value, right? Let's get to the next one. This comes from Andrea Markowski. Sorry if I didn't say that correctly. She's actually an MBA student. This is really interesting. It's a innovator of the future, right? Dream job is to work in corporate innovation. She's actually asking, when I'm interviewing, how is it best to build the business case? She's already got the experience in creating startups within companies, but when she's interviewing maybe with a new company, how does she show that ability to create, and how does she build the case early on?
I'm going to go a little political here.
Oh.
I would say if you are a new starter within a company, you're just interviewing in.
Mm-hmm.
It would be prudent not to expose all your kimono right on day one. It has to be good enough to get in,
mm-hmm.
because you want to first test out what the culture is and how to work in that culture to be able to present your ideas within.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know people, you have to develop networks, you have to develop, understand the culture and find the path and find that person. And it might take 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. So it's okay to mention saying, hey, I have this entrepreneurial background and I can do the same within the company, but not open the kimono on day one and first get the feel for what it's like to work within the company, and then take the next steps of proposing whatever you have in your mind.
That's terrific. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Sure.
Ramesh chimed in and said, how does a visa-dependent individual, somebody who may be on an H-1B here into America, do they have the platform? Do they have the support to do a startup, or are they incentivized to be part of it? And are they how would they begin the process of internal startup within their company?
Alex, to be honest with you, this is where I'm going to claim ignorance. The reasons why I don't know the laws. I mean, I was on H1 many years ago as an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what today's laws are in terms of because you come in H1 on a limited time period.
Mm-hmm.
I think the rules of employment still apply. That means whatever you create is still owned by the parent company.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one area I don't think I'm qualified to answer, because that requires legal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite the legal guy. So sorry,
I'll let you play one on TV if you like. No, I think that's a great answer. But coming from an individual yourself who migrated to America and went through the H-1B process, I mean, there's opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So Ramesh, I maybe would suggest reaching out to Sandy and talking about maybe some of your experience in that, and I think that would be a good outlet for you. But to wrap this up, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We had a tremendous turnout. This is our first virtual event, so I'm looking forward to the suggestions, recommendations I might find in the survey to follow. I want to thank the OEMBA staff, David, Kit, Sandy, and thank you for putting your experience out there. Wendy, Sierra, everybody from the OEMBA staff. Sandy, thank you for putting your experience out there and sharing it with us. Hopefully we can engage some more of our OEMBA alumni, other Portland business people to create this value, because our mission is really to provide that meaningful opportunity for the greater Portland business community. And so we can all find success and grow our business, right? To that end, as the OEMBA alumni president, I would be mistaken to not mention what future events we have coming up. Coming up on February 19th, we will have a live event here at the OEMBA building. Wednesday, February 19th at 5:30. This is going to be a growth marketing strategy presentation. We'll have a great panel of local marketing and digital experts here to talk about how to take your business to the next level. Then coming up on March 18th, we're going to have a diversity and inclusion in business live event here at the OEMBA. That should be also having a panel or possibly a keynote. Still some details working out, but please don't forget to put that on your calendar. It should be a great event. And then last but not least, date and time to be determined, but as it is our ritual in May, we will have a social event that will most likely be at one of our local watering holes. So I hope to have you guys all engage in those events. We hope you found value in this opportunity, and we look forward to engaging with you in future events. For now, Alex and Sandy.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, OEMBA team, for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you guys all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.